Caspian Hawthorne burrowed his neck into his thick wool coat, his eyes fixed on the train window as it slowly carried him past the mottled, snow-dusted mountains. The cold air slipping in through the cracks reminded him of the warm drawing room at Hawthorne Castle, where the hearth always glowed with fire. Though raised in luxury, 10-year-old Caspian still felt an indescribable emptiness in his heart. Tens of pine forests flanked the tracks, the late autumn sun dancing on the treetops, as if guiding him toward this strange land, a place he had never set foot in, yet which would become his temporary home for the next 5 years. The wheels groaned to a halt and the welcome calls of his guardians rang out at once. Caspian stepped onto the small station platform, choking back tears as he stole one last look at his parents, who turned left onto the gravel path leading back to Hawthorne Manor near London. He followed the escort to the right, hurrying toward a group of locals dressed in simple woolens, their gait light and steeped in centuries of tradition. His eyes met the warm gaze of Mrs. Vogel, the family's housekeeper who had cared for him from the age of 5, before slipping away into the glow of the sunset. The narrow dirt road wound around freshly harvested cornfields. The wind carried the scent of straw and cardamom blossoms, whispering to Caspian of a simpler life so different from the crystal halls and rose gardens of the castle. In his hand was a small suitcase containing nothing but a few plain outfits and a leather-bound journal. In his mind, fragmented memories of the girl who had saved him flickered into focus, her petite figure, her tinkling laughter, and her eyes shimmering like a mountain spring. As the weathered wooden gate creaked open, Caspian paused to take in the sight of the log house roofed with pine thatch. Under the eaves stood a moss-covered stone table, and ducks waddled around a small pond. The scene reminded him of the wooden toy garden at the castle, but this place felt more alive than any toy, each leaf and dew-laden lotus petal breathing with life. A kindly smile greeted him as Mrs. Vogel said, "Welcome home, Caspian. Your mother said you may roam freely, just remember to come in for meals on time." The next morning, Elowen Solenne awoke before dawn had fully broken. The 5-year-old tiptoed out of bed, her tiny hand brushing against the cool wooden wall still damp with night's dew. The scent of cardamom and the earthy aroma of wet soil drifted in from the surrounding vineyard. Her hair was tousled from dream-filled sleep, but her face lit up with an innocent smile at the thought of foraging for herbs with her father. Her mother had passed away when she was very young. Her father, old Mr. Vogel, was the only one left to give her confidence, teaching her which plants could be turned into medicine and which flowers healed wounds. Along the leaf-strewn path, Elowen skipped like a fawn in the woods. She tugged at her father's sleeve to point out ancient trees whose roots sprawled like spider webs, then secretly plucked a few shiny black blossoms that bloomed only in November. In her eyes, everything brimmed with boundless curiosity. She paused beside a damp, mossy boulder, watching soft sunlight filter through the branches, when she suddenly heard the babble of a nearby stream. She smiled, certain that today she would discover something wondrous. Caspian left the main house, clutching his fur cap as he followed a footpath down into the valley. He came upon a slender creek whose waters were so clear he could see every white pebble on its bed. The chill of the water spread across his face as he closed his eyes and savored the moment. Here, there was no rumble of carriages, no ringing of phones, only water, wind, and birdsong. His heart felt as light as the stream, freeing him from thoughts of nobility, duty, and inheritance disputes he had yet to understand. Elowen heard a sudden splash, like a muffled cry from the water's depths, and froze. She knelt, spotting a slender figure immersed up to his waist in the deep pool, his limbs flailing as he struggled to stay afloat. Holding her breath, she realized the boy did not know how to swim. Without hesitation, she sprang over a clump of reeds, stepped onto a slippery rock, and plunged into the icy water, paying no mind to the numbing cold in her small feet. Underwater, Elowen felt the current rush around her slight frame, her ears ringing with the stream's roar. She saw the boy's form sinking, his legs kicking frantically. Diving down, she gripped his shoulders and pushed him upward toward the surface. The boy broke through, mouth agape, hands splashing desperately for air. Elowen clutched his hair and hauled him toward the bank. When they surfaced, Elowen wrapped her arms around Caspian and laid him on the damp grass, tilting his face downward into the water. She pounded his back firmly to expel the water, her eyes tracking every glittering drop. Caspian gasped, water streaming down his brow and nose. He shivered, uttering his first words in a broken whisper, "Thank you." Elowen smiled, brushing a droplet from his cheek with her small hand. "Are you all right?" Her voice rang clear, like a bell in a fairy tale. Caspian looked up at the girl, his wet hair plastered to his forehead, breath still ragged. My name is Caspian." Elowen replied gently, pride shining in her eyes, "I'm Elowen Solenne." He was struck by her unfamiliar yet gentle name. They sat side by side on the muddy grass, bare feet stained with earth, two strangers suddenly bound by an invisible thread. The autumn sun painted the leaves gold along the stream, its light filtering through tall trees as if sketching an immortal portrait. Caspian gazed at Elowen's smiling face, feeling for the first time that he was not alone among his noble kin. Elowen stretched out her hand to catch stray rays of sunlight, wondering if this chance meeting was the miracle her father had foretold. In that moment, they spoke no more, yet the memory of the stream and each other's gaze was etched into their hearts, like a small star shining in the night of their childhood. 10 years had passed since Elowen Solenne saved Caspian Hawthorne by the stream, yet in the heart of that 10-year-old boy her image remained clearer than any portrait. He returned to London with his parents, living in the imposing Hawthorne Manor with its soaring stone columns and vast rose gardens. Each morning upon waking, Caspian gazed out the large window at the silver birches bowing gently in the breeze and the distant hum of city traffic. Though the world around him buzzed with activity, his heart still ached with an emptiness, because in that realm he had never glimpsed Elowen's face. In the early years, Caspian threw himself into his studies, striving to fit into aristocratic society. He learned to conduct himself with solemn decorum, wore expensive tailored suits, and polished every phrase he spoke to match noble etiquette. Yet whenever he found a spare moment, he would open his leather-bound journal, the only gift his father had ever given him, and carefully inscribe upon its first page, "Met Elowen Solenne by the stream, November 12th. By the hearth's warm glow he would turn those pages again and again, closing his eyes to summon her bright eyes and tinkling laughter echoing through the valley. At 15, he was thrust into the family business's first major undertaking. The Hawthorne conglomerate was expanding into numerous countries, and when his elder brother, the rightful heir, vanished in a plane crash, Caspian was unexpectedly entrusted with leading the asset management division. Under crushing pressure, he worked ceaselessly from dawn until dusk, eyes ringed with dark circles and hands never leaving the computer mouse. Yet one truth remained unchanging. Deep in his heart he vowed that one day he would find Elowen again. Meanwhile, in the small alpine village, Elowen grew ever more passionate about herbs and the natural world. The 15-year-old became agile and resolute. Each morning she joined her father in the forest, seeking rare roots and blossoms for medicinal use. Sometimes she carried her little journal, filled with sketches of leaves and notes on their healing properties. Despite life's hardships, Elowen always wore a wildflower smile, believing every plant held its own wondrous magic. Mrs. Vogel, the housekeeper who had cared for Caspian in his childhood, still kept the faded photograph of the two children by the stream. She clutched it close on cold nights, whispering, "These two share an inexplicable bond." She urged her son many times to seek out the mountain girl, but the Hawthorne enterprise was in crisis and no one had time to map a journey into the deep woods. Silently, she sent a letter to Elowen inviting her to London for a pharmaceutical design competition, but the missive never reached her, buried under fallen leaves when Elowen's father accidentally left it in an old chest. That first winter in London, Caspian experienced snow for the first time. Fine white flakes drifted against the window panes. He wrapped himself in a thick wool cloak, cradled a cup of hot chocolate, and thought of Elowen. He wondered if she was safe, if her small hands could still carry heavy baskets of herbs. Her absence planted in his heart a persistent longing, like a river that flows endlessly through memory. At the same time, Elowen turned 16 and won a prestigious scholarship to the Milan Institute of Medical Design. The university, nestled among Renaissance-era palazzos, was as grand as it was vibrant in research. She left her village carrying a backpack full of mountain-grown seeds and her dreams of healing. On the Italian train, she watched the distant leaning tower of Pisa slip by, promising herself she would become Europe's finest medical designer, so that one day she might return home bearing life-saving remedies. Separated by 2 continents, Caspian and Elowen seemed to live in parallel worlds, he amid the tangled disputes of inheritance and family duty, she among alchemical formulas, swatches of fabric, and the bright lights of Milan's fairs. Yet within both of them there burned an indescribable yearning, like a lone star flickering in the vast sky. They had not met again, but every night, whether London's lamps glowed or Milan's streetlights shimmered, they listened for the murmuring of that stream, reminding them that a mortal bond still awaited its next chapter. The dawn light filtered through the expansive windows of Hawthorne Castle's study, tinting the oil paintings that lined the walls with a rosy glow. Caspian Hawthorne entered, draped in a dark tailored vest, his warm yet weary gaze belonging to a 20-year-old bearing the weight of his family's legacy. Before him lay towering stacks of auction dossiers and sale contracts spread across the ebony desk. From the distant boardroom came the steady rap of the gavel, reminding him of the upcoming meeting where he would face his uncle, who was fervently challenging his claim to the inheritance. Caspian closed his eyes and inhaled deeply to steady his racing heart. Few could see that beneath his calm, steely exterior lurked a fear of failure he struggled to suppress. The 10 years spent in the Vogel village remained vivid in his mind, so whenever pressure mounted, he would recall Elowen Solenne's face by the stream, like a beacon guiding him through life's storms. He believed that finding her would lighten his spirit and shore up his emotional strength. The boardroom was filled with members of the board of directors. His uncle's sharp glare followed Caspian's every step as he entered without offering a greeting. All eyes bore into him, silently questioning, is this young man capable of upholding the inheritance? Bowing his head, Caspian greeted them in a warm, steady voice and began presenting his restructuring plan. The title on the first page, Reviving the Hawthorne Brand Through Green Technology and Human-Centered Investment, rested folded in his hand like a solemn vow. The debate quickly grew heated. His uncle argued that the corporation's value lay in its centuries-old traditions and could not be modernized so casually. Caspian countered each point with precise data, market trend analyses, and long-term benefit forecasts. Sweat beaded on his brow, every word he spoke carried the weight of his determination to prove himself. When silence fell and all eyes were upon him, he concluded, I respect our past, but if we do not adapt, we risk losing our future. A moment of stillness passed, then applause erupted, mostly from the younger directors. Caspian allowed himself a rare smile, his heart swelling with emotion. He realized that responsibility and expectation were not shackles, but the very impetus for growth. After the meeting, he returned to his private chamber and opened a wooden box engraved with the name Elowen, a heartfelt gift from Mrs. Vogel that contained the photograph of the 2 children by the stream. He touched the photo gently, his thoughts sinking into tender nostalgia. Meanwhile, in the Milan Institute's design studio, Elowen Solenne stood before her blueprint for a garment that fused medicinal herbs with silk. Under the soft yellow light, each delicate line appeared crisp and clear, embodying both grace and strength. Her nimble fingers guided needle and thread in meticulous stitches, infusing each seam with the essence of mint and dried chamomile. A passing instructor glanced over, nodding in approval. This combination is truly creative, you're setting a new trend. Pride and excitement welled up in Elowen's heart. She recalled the days by the stream, when her childhood dream of healing through herbs was born from innocent compassion. Now she employed her talent and ambition to bring pharmaceuticals onto the fashion stage. She believed every outfit she designed told a story of nature and humanity intertwined. Yet beneath her confidence lay moments of hesitation, worries about the future and fears she might forget the gentle face that once saved her. That evening, after classes, Elowen slipped into a cozy cafe tucked into a cobblestone alley, laptop in hand as she drafted emails inviting museums to collaborate on exhibitions. Soft jazz wafted through the warm interior, a stark contrast to the chill wind outside. She sipped her latte and watched bicycle lights flicker past the darkened street. In her mind's eye she saw the sodden coat and the deep blue eyes of Caspian by the stream. She wondered if one day she might return to London to reunite with the boy who saved her life. Late at night, each in his own place, Caspian and Elowen lay awake, consumed by unending thoughts. He in his gilded chamber overlooking the wind-swept rose gardens, she in her quaint Milan attic strewn with books and sketches. Both listened for the whisper of their hearts calling each other, as if two beats joining in a destined melody. The gentle murmur of the stream echoed in their memories, quietly reminding them that their bond had not faded. Spring mornings in Milan were bright with sunlight as Elowen Solenne opened the elegant envelope on her desk. Inside lay an invitation from Charlotte Hawthorne. You are cordially invited to London to design the ceremonial gown for Mr. Hawthorne's birthday celebration. The letter smelled of fresh ink, and the stately signature of Caspian's grandmother made her heart flutter. She traced her name on the envelope with her fingertip, confessing to herself that this might be the greatest turning point since leaving her Alpine village. A rush of excitement mingled with anxiety swept through her, memories of the stream and fleeting images of Caspian danced in her mind, causing her to smile softly. Elowen packed her suitcase in her small attic with her customary care. She selected each premium fabric sample she had carried from home, a bundle of dried mint leaves, and even some purple chamomile blossoms still redolent with fragrance. The scent of herbs filled the narrow hallway, making the space feel dense with memories. She tried to recall the formula of the remedy her father had once made for her, a blend of herbs that kept her from catching colds whenever she left the village. Yet a flicker of worry surfaced. Would 5 years abroad have left her strong enough to withstand London's chill? She shook her head briskly and reminded herself, I will prepare thoroughly. On departure day, Malpensa Airport bustled with activity. Elowen wore an emerald trench coat, her grip firm on the leather suitcase whose wheels whispered over the marble floor. She passed through check-in, her boarding pass clearly marked Elowen Mael. Excitement bubbled within her, though a trace of apprehension lingered at the corner of her eyes. The cabin door closed behind her, and the engine's low roar reverberated beneath her seat. She pressed her hand against the dried narcissus petals tucked in a small box, her talisman, and thought, I will not disappoint Mrs. Hawthorne. She landed at Heathrow in the late afternoon. Stepping into the baggage claim area, London's breeze brushed her skin like a straightforward greeting. She was met by the driver Mrs. Charlotte's office had arranged, who bowed politely before ushering her into a spacious car. En route to Hyde Park, Elowen gazed out at fresh oak leaves, festive tulip beds in full bloom, and the romantic narrow streets lined with historic townhouses. Her heart fluttered, but beneath the thrill lay a sudden weight in her chest. This was her first journey from Milan into the world of aristocratic grandeur and hidden intrigues. That evening, in the oak-paneled drawing room on the east wing of Hawthorne Manor, Elowen met Mrs. Charlotte. Under the glow of a crystal chandelier, the silver-haired matriarch appeared with an elegant chignon and eyes aglow with delight. She offered a gentle smile and raised a hand in greeting. Miss Elowen Solenne, you must be the talented designer I've heard so many praises about from Milan. Her voice was warm yet carried unmistakable authority. Elowen bowed deeply. It is my great honor, ma'am. She was invited to enjoy rose tea and then presented with a portfolio brimming with sketches and notes outlining the celebratory attire. The mingled aromas of cinnamon tea and floral essence filled the room, conveying Mrs. Charlotte's profound confidence in her. On the first day of sourcing materials for the gown, Elowen spent the entire morning in the Hawthorne family's atelier, where fabrics and botanicals intertwined. As she bent to examine swatches of white lace, a wave of dizziness and chills swept over her. A sudden fever struck after hours of non-stop travel. Elowen fought to remain upright, but her head spun and sweat soaked her shoulders. An assistant hurried her to the manor's infirmary, where a dedicated team of physicians and nurses stood ready. Upon hearing the news, Mrs. Charlotte's face registered serious concern. She summoned Caspian's private physician and instructed him to monitor Elowen's condition through the night. In the warm sick room, warmer than any place she had ever known, Elowen drifted in and out of sleep to the steady beeps of monitoring equipment and a nurse's calm breathing. She startled awake when she felt a warm hand gently clasp her wrist. A familiar, deep voice murmured, "You're awake. Don't worry, I'm here." Opening her eyes, Elowen saw Caspian Hawthorne's face, refreshed, though his eyes were wide with surprise. Her heart tightened as she heard his strong breath beside her bed. Blinking back tears, she found her voice and asked, "Why are you here?" In that instant, everything else, the soft golden light, the sterile scent of antiseptic, the hum of the machines, faded away, leaving only the two of them gazing at each other, as though the stream itself were flowing silently between the banks of their shared memory. Caspian leaned close, his voice low and soft like winter's breath slipping through a window crack. "You have a high fever. The doctor says you must rest for a few more days." The ceiling light shone down on the pristine white sheets, reflecting the worry etched on his brow. Elowen closed her eyes, feeling Caspian's warm hand gently squeeze her wrist, as if to share a bit of heat in the cold infirmary. Her heart fluttered, but she forced herself to ask, How did you know I was here?" Caspian sighed and straightened her pillow. "Grandmother called as soon as she heard you'd been admitted. I was in New York and had to cancel my trip immediately to come back to London." His voice carried a hint of exhaustion from the urgent flight, yet his gaze remained tenderly fixed on her every breath. Elowen watched him through her damp lashes, surprised and comforted both at once. His words rang clearly in her mind. She mattered that much in his world. Soft footsteps paused outside the door. The resident doctor knocked lightly and spoke in measured tones. "Sorry to disturb you, the patient needs rest." Caspian nodded quickly, whispered in Elowen's ear, "I'll be right back," then stood, bowed politely to the physician, and stepped out. Once the door closed, Elowen lay still, her thoughts awhirl. The 10-year-old boy by the stream, the handsome man at Hawthorne Manor, their first reunion in this sick room, all danced through her mind like a film reel. She forced herself to sit up and reached for the small card Caspian had left on the bedside table, a simple note that read, "Wishing you a swift recovery. Caspian." The neat handwriting felt like an impossible promise. Elowen smiled softly, eyes bright with wonder. She vowed to get well quickly so she could fulfill the work ahead. Yet deep inside, she found herself savoring every moment he spent by her side. The next morning, Elowen propped herself with pillows, her laptop open on her lap displaying fabric samples. Mrs. Charlotte appeared, her eyes shining. "It's been wonderful having you here. Thanks to you, the project is running smoothly." Her tone was fond, as if addressing a beloved grandchild. Elowen returned her smile. "I'm honored by your trust." Mrs. Charlotte surveyed the room, poured cinnamon-scented tea into a cup, and said, "Caspian will drop by after lunch to check on you." Elowen nodded, her heart giving another flutter. She recalled her first invitation, before she'd ever met Caspian, hearing only of the Hawthorne heir praised by Milan's faculty. She had intended to remain strictly professional and distant from this noble family. But now, faced with Caspian's gentle attentions, pouring her tea, drawing out her chair, she realized her feelings had overtaken reason. The childhood memory grew clearer, his stream-deep gaze, her fluttering heart grateful for the life he saved. That afternoon, Caspian returned carrying a tray of fruit and a steaming bowl of chicken congee. He set them gently on the table, his voice warm. "The doctor said you need nourishment. A Hawthorne must stay strong." Elowen accepted the bowl and smiled softly, "Thank you." Between them, no flowery words were needed, their looks and gestures conveyed everything. They spoke little the rest of the day, exchanging only attentive glances. Caspian sat beside her, jotting down notes on fabric qualities and herbal properties. Elowen traced the lines of her design notebook, eyes following each stroke of ink. As the sunset poured through the windowpane, the final adjustment to her prescription was complete. Caspian rose and bowed. "Tomorrow I'll bring you back to the castle to select the remaining materials." Elowen nodded, her heart racing. This was their first real appointment after so many years apart. When the infirmary door clicked shut, Elowen leaned back against her pillows, eyes tracing the ceiling. She thought of Caspian, the elegant gentleman with the warm heart, who had come to her side like an undeniable destiny. In her childhood memory she had felt only gratitude, now she sensed love beginning to blossom. Somewhere beyond the Alps, the little stream must be murmuring with the joy of two reunited hearts. Morning light filtered through the lattice windows of Hawthorne Castle, casting shimmering flecks of gold across the polished stone floor. Caspian Hawthorne stood ready outside the door, impeccably dressed in a deep blue suit, his eyes alight as though greeting a long-lost friend. When Elowen Solenne emerged in her softly pleated evening gown, his heart quietly leapt. She no longer looked pale and weary, but radiant with life. The path leading into the rose garden was steeped in Caspian's memories, the very place where he and Elowen had once admired blossoms together as children. Today, her silhouette fell upon the carpet of fallen leaves, and the spring breeze played through her hair, carrying the scent of grass and flowers beneath her steps. Elowen inhaled deeply, a rush of familiarity washing over her, as if she'd been transported back to her alpine childhood. Caspian intercepted her on the gravel path, his voice soft and warm. "Does this spot remind you of where you saved me?" Elowen furrowed her brow, peering into his eyes before nodding gently. Though she could not say why, her heart fluttered, ancient memories blending with the present. They settled on an aged stone bench beside a rose bed. Caspian handed her a piece of white lace salvaged from her gown, explaining that it would serve as the base fabric for the ceremonial dress. Elowen traced the delicate threads, her eyes thoughtful. "You want me to dye the fabric with your own herbs?" Caspian smiled. "We'll create it together. Remember those mint leaves in your suitcase?" She returned his smile and reached into her bag for a small pouch of dried mint leaves. The herb's scent drifted up like a pathway to the past. Caspian gently immersed the leaves in a basin of clear water, his movements confident and practiced. To Elowen, he no longer seemed the aristocratic heir but the same boy who had wrapped her in herbal bandages by the stream. When the liquid turned a rich emerald hue, Elowen leaned in, her eyes shining with emotion. "So the gown for your grandmother will not only be beautiful, it will carry the essence of the herbs." Caspian nodded, his voice low. "I want this gift to express my gratitude for saving me." Amid the roses, they forgot the lavish world around them. Elowen felt the sincerity in every gesture he made. She remained silent, letting the morning sunshine weave through her hair and across her face, savoring the moment her heart stirred for the first time at the dawn of love. As afternoon fell, Caspian escorted Elowen into the castle's textile gallery. There, he had carefully arranged silks woven with botanical motifs, gemstones, and sparkling sequins. Each material told its own story, the mint leaves evoking her home, the white lace symbolizing purity, and the glittering sequins mirroring the light in her eyes when she smiled. Before they parted, Elowen took his hand, her gaze earnest. "Thank you for trusting me and bringing me back to these memories." Caspian smiled softly and squeezed her hand. "Let's write the next chapter of our story together." When the manor gates closed behind Elowen's carriage, Caspian remained standing in the fading light, hope blossoming in his chest. The roses in the garden seemed to promise that this nascent love would flourish and bear fruit, continuing the stream of fate they had first encountered so many years ago. Early on the morning of the birthday celebration, Hawthorne Castle gleamed draped in golden banners, flags, and wreaths of white and purple roses scattered across the lawn. Elowen Solenne awoke in the guest suite as dawn's rays filtered through the curtains, casting dancing shafts of light across the silk carpet. She sat by the window, fingers tracing the final sketch of the ceremonial gown, her heart fluttering with both excitement and nerves. The scent of cinnamon tea rising from the teapot on the table reminded her to stay calm and complete this last stage. Descending to the makeshift sewing workshop in the castle's east wing, Elowen found the artisans busy hand-embroidering mint-green leaf motifs onto the white silk. Her gaze swept over each stitch, each silvery thread shimmering like dewdrops, then paused at the collar's edge, where Caspian had requested a stylized S, blending her name and his into a small emblem. Suppressing a smile, she moved to her pencil table and added a flowing vine pattern along the sleeve, ensuring the gown would not only be beautiful but also bear a deep personal touch. Throughout the fitting, Caspian never took his eyes off her. As she turned slowly before the full-length mirror, the skirt swaying, the silhouette hugging her form, he realized her allure sprang not only from her talent but her noble spirit. Tilting her head, she asked softly, "Is it all right?" Her voice was as gentle as music, yet it made his heart skip. "Perfect," he replied, unwavering gaze filled with pride in the designer's work. By late afternoon, the grand ballroom was prepared to welcome guests. Caspian's stately navy suit, tailored to perfection, hung ready nearby. Elowen donned a light silk jacket and stepped into the marble corridor, where clusters of morning glories and winter jasmine added a magical flourish. Mrs. Charlotte Hawthorne beamed with satisfaction. "You have achieved everything I hoped for these many years." Elowen bowed in gratitude, her eyes finding Caspian's for a moment that set her heart singing. Prelude music began, and the rows of seats filled with Hawthorne family friends, dignitaries, and business partners. When Mrs. Charlotte appeared on the stairway and approached the dais to speak, the atmosphere grew solemn. Elowen stood at the room's edge, her pulse quickening at Mrs. Charlotte's warm smile. The matriarch recounted the childhood incident when Elowen saved a life and expressed her hope that today's gown would mark a new chapter for the family. Thunderous applause greeted Elowen as she stepped onto the stage. She bowed gracefully, her heart brimming with emotion. Under the sparkling lights, Caspian quietly made his way through the crowd toward Elowen. Leaning close, he whispered, "I'm so proud of you." She turned, her gaze full of devotion, as if only the two of them existed in that instant. Surrounded by radiant white and purple roses, their hearts beat in time with the piano's gentle melody, planting the seeds of a love born from care and shared dreams. After the guests had departed and lanterns lit the night garden with the faint scent of blossoms, Caspian led Elowen out onto the second-floor balcony. The night breeze carried hints of oakwood and jasmine. Taking her hand, he said in a warm voice, "You've made today perfect." Elowen rested her head on his shoulder, starlight dancing overhead as though blessing them. She sighed softly, "Thank you for always believing in me and standing by my side." Beneath London's night sky, Hawthorne Castle lay hushed, save for the gentle rhythm of two hearts beating as one, celebrating the triumphant dawn of their love. At noon in Hawthorne Manor, the luncheon bell rang, and the grand dining room gleamed with classic carved tables and chairs. Caspian stood at the door, his pale blue suit slightly creased from that morning's meeting. He smiled as Elowen Solenne descended the staircase in her fluttering silk midi dress. His heart stirred. It was the first time she had come here not to inspect fabrics, but to join him for an intimate meal with his mother and sister. Elowen quietly offered a greeting to Lady Isabella, Caspian's mother, elegant in a blush-pink vintage gown. The lady regarded her thoughtfully through gold-rimmed glasses, then smiled warmly. "Do you find everything comfortable here?" Her voice was gentle yet formal. Elowen inclined her head and replied softly, "I feel honored to continue designing for the Hawthorne family." Her heart fluttered with excitement and a touch of nerves. On the table lay a fresh goat cheese salad drizzled with vinaigrette, its aroma awakening the appetite. Caspian introduced Elowen to his 17-year-old sister, Arabella, wearing a white sweater and floral skirt. Arabella looked at her with admiration. "You must be Elowen, the talented designer Caspian has told us about." Elowen blushed and smiled shyly. "It's a pleasure to meet you." After lunch, Caspian led Elowen to the family's sewing room, where Arabella was trying on new silhouettes. He surprised her by asking Elowen to design the gown for the upcoming teenage gala, normally a project reserved for his mother or grandmother. Though taken aback, Elowen saw the resolve in his eyes. "I want you involved in every aspect." She fell silent for a moment, then nodded, her heart warmed by his insistence that she stay by his side. Surrounded by fabric swatches and design sketches, Elowen immersed herself in her work. She drew soft curves, took Arabella's measurements, and selected lace that harmonized with mint leaf motifs. Behind her, Caspian whispered, "This gown will make her shine." His voice was close enough to feel its warmth. Elowen smiled, reminding herself that his trust was her greatest inspiration. That afternoon, Arabella modeled the finished dress, her face radiant in the mirror. Elowen beamed and patted the young lady's shoulder, then glanced across the room to see Caspian watching every stitch intently. Their gazes met, full of understanding, no words needed. In that moment, Elowen wondered just how deeply her heart was stirring. In the tiled corridor outside, Caspian took Elowen's hand and led her to the small rose garden behind the manor. The setting sun bathed them in golden light, and the heady scent of blossoms filled the air. He spoke softly, "Soon my mother will need several new outfits, along with my grandmother." His voice was warm. "I hope you'll agree to help the two most important women in my life." Elowen's eyes glistened with emotion. "I would be delighted to do that by your side." In the cool breeze of late afternoon, they paused before the rose bed that held so many childhood memories. Caspian added gently, "Anne, I hope you'll accompany me whenever I visit them." Their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in unison to a new melody. Elowen nodded, her smile confident, "I will never leave this home again." The chapter of the stream of memories closed, making way for a love newly blossomed and promises that would endure. A grey London morning, the air crisp like a gentle autumn breath. Elowen Solenne entered Lady Isabella Hawthorne's office, where intricately carved wooden furniture and stained glass windows cast rainbow reflections on the walls. Lady Isabella sat behind her desk, peering through a magnifying glass at Elowen's latest evening gown sketch. On seeing Elowen, she smiled, "Have you prepared your ideas for next week's charity gala?" Elowen handed over her design pages. Each sketch bore herbal motifs, intertwining mint leaves and pure lavender blooms, pale mint green fabric with metallic accents. Lady Isabella furrowed her brow in admiration. "Such originality. I believe this gown will leave our guests in awe." In her eyes, Elowen saw not only recognition of her talent but respect for the mountain girl who had won over the Hawthornes. That afternoon, Arabella invited Elowen to the small riverside castle by the Thames to source materials. The younger sister led her down dimly lit corridors lined with oil lamps. The fabric shop lay behind an ancient wooden door, its interior packed with bolts of silk, spangled trims, and faux gemstones. Arabella winked mischievously. "Caspian saved this place for us. He says they have a special cloth for mother." Elowen drifted her hand across each roll of fabric, savoring the silky tapestry of lace and thread. She discovered an emerald-hued jacquard whose embossed pattern rippled like water. She immediately envisioned the bodice for Lady Charlotte, a marriage of aristocratic elegance and the warmth of homegrown herbs. Arabella beamed. "Found what you need?" Elowen smiled. "This one. It will highlight her grace while keeping a touch of nature's warmth." As they returned to the manor, dusk settled over London. Streetlights glittered on the river's surface like a gilded ribbon. Caspian greeted them at the foot of the stairs, bowing to Arabella before his gaze lingered on Elowen. Without a word, she knew his approval. He took her hand and said, "Thank you for choosing such perfect fabrics." That evening, at the Hawthorne Foundation's charity gala, Elowen appeared in a simple yet exquisite emerald green dress, her design for Arabella. Guests marveled at the fusion of exquisite silk and botanical detail. Lady Charlotte glowed as she watched her future daughter-in-law grace the red carpet. Lady Isabella stood quietly proud, observing her son and Elowen beneath crystal chandeliers, her heart at ease. During the event, Caspian led Elowen to a private balcony, where city lights stretched across the horizon. He looked into her eyes. "You outdid yourself. I never imagined tonight could be so perfect." Elowen swept her hair aside and replied softly, "I'm happy to create magic with you." The night breeze carried jasmine's scent into the hush, and their love sparkled like a burst of light in the warmth. That weekend, Caspian invited Elowen to the family picnic at Richmond Park, wandering beneath rows of red maples. He brought a basket of bread and cheese from Borough Market. Elowen laughed as he carefully arranged the spread on a blanket. The entire family joined in the merriment. Lady Charlotte told childhood tales, Arabella playfully chased after squirrels, and Lady Isabella inquired kindly about Elowen's work. Amid the fresh greenery, Elowen watched Caspian smile in contentment. She realized that beyond talent and prestige, the greatest gift she had found was this simple love and his unwavering support. From that chance meeting by the stream to today's picnic at Richmond, their 20-year journey had been bound by small acts of care and shared trust. On the drive back to the manor, with sunset painting the sky gold, Caspian stopped the car at the gate. He stepped out and gently embraced Elowen from behind, whispering, "Do you know why I brought you here today?" Elowen turned, curiosity shining in her eyes. He smiled and said softly, "Because this is the first place I wanted you to see our Hawthorne plaque, as a testament to our love and our future." Beneath the golden western sky, they stood together leaning back to back, gazing at Hawthorne Castle rising proudly in London. Though the stream of memory lay far behind, it had guided two hearts across a long journey, leading them today into a new chapter of happiness and prosperity, with love as their guiding star. Early morning in London still held a veil of mist when Caspian Hawthorne waited for Elowen on the platform at Paddington. The pale yellow lights of the station reflected off the floor, still wet from last night's rain. He stood quietly against a steel pillar, his long trench coat buttoned solemnly, his eyes tracking her every step. Elowen wrapped a silk scarf around her neck, surprised when she saw him waving from afar. "I've called us a taxi. Today we're going a little farther out." Her heart fluttered with curiosity and excitement. They climbed into the car parked just outside the station and sped out of the city, crossing the iconic Millennium Bridge and passing through historic Greenwich. Caspian explained, "I want you to see where I lived as a child before I left." Elowen nodded, watching the streets give way to fields of golden wheat and rolling green meadows. The sound of the wind rushing through the window mixed with distant car horns, carrying the scent of damp earth and autumn chestnuts. When the car stopped before the gate of a small wooden cottage nestled at the edge of a forest, Elowen felt a pang in her chest. Moss-covered roof tiles, dark brown wooden shutters, and wildflower beds edged with yellow leaves, all looked as if lifted from a distant memory. Caspian opened the door, stepped to her side, and gently offered her the scarf. "This is where Mrs. Vogel cared for me 5 years ago." Elowen bowed her head, her heart racing. Together they wandered through the untamed garden. Caspian pointed to the sparse barley stalks. "Back then, you were gathering herbs over there, by the stream." Elowen smiled softly, her gaze distant as though she saw the little girl of 5 once more. A shaft of sunlight filtered through the pine boughs, illuminating dewdrops on rosemary like fragments of childhood flooding her mind. Caspian led her down a narrow path through the woods. Birds chirped in the canopy, and the wind whispered through the leaves, coaxing new life from the stillness. A final bend brought them to the stream bank, the very spot of their first meeting. The water ran clear and gentle, sunlight dancing on the sandy stones below. Caspian looked at Elowen and asked softly, "Can you feel anything?" Elowen stared at the water, her hand trembling as it brushed the cool surface, then fell silent, her lashes quivering. In the hush, vague memories surfaced, a small smile, soaking wet hands, the gentle murmur of the stream. Elowen exhaled, her eyes blinking rapidly as if trying to hold on to a fleeting image. Caspian gently took her hand, warm and steady, and said, "I've searched for you all these 20 years. You alone are my son." Elowen gazed at him in silence, tears welling in her eyes. You are the one I've always been searching for?" Her voice trembled with wonder. Caspian nodded, his eyes shining with joy, "And I hope we will never let each other go again." Morning light filtered through the trees, casting glimmering patches across the stream. Two hearts drew close, memory and present merging into one, opening a new chapter filled with love and understanding. Morning sunlight gently poured into the memory-filled drawing room of Hawthorne Manor, where Caspian and Elowen had just returned from their forest journey to rediscover the old stream. Caspian invited her to sit at the ebony tea table and placed 2 steaming cups of honey chamomile tea before them. He looked at Elowen with sincere eyes, his hand lightly brushing the silk scarf on her knee. "I want to tell you the story of that day," he said in his warm, low voice. Elowen nodded softly, her heart fluttering with anticipation. Caspian sat upright, leaning in as if sharing a cherished secret. "The day you jumped into the stream to save me, I was only 10 years old, a frail child struggling in those icy waters. You cried out my name and pulled me from the brink of drowning. In that moment, I knew I would never forget you." Elowen listened to every word, her eyes welling with tears. Fleeting memories came rushing back, the tumbling water, her small hand gripping his shoulder, each detail vivid once again. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, his eyes shining with pride. "I've kept the photograph of us by the stream and even the moss-covered bench in the rose garden, so whenever I feel weary, all I have to do is think of you." Elowen exhaled, her hands trembling as they touched the old photograph. She smiled through tears of joy. I remember it now. Everything feels so alive." Tears streamed down her face as she smiled, overcome with happiness. A gentle hush fell between them, broken only by the soft beating of 2 hearts in unison. Caspian stood and tenderly supported Elowen by the shoulders, leading her through the glass doors into the vibrant rose garden. Then he invited her to join him in the second-floor conference room, where the modern family meeting table awaited them for a new venture. "I hope you will become the founding partner of our Hawthorne and Solenne brand, to bring the essence of nature into high fashion." Elowen hesitated for a moment, her eyes alight with creative passion. "With you, I'm ready." In that instant, her faith soared. From the brave mountain girl who once saved a life to the renowned European designer, she had found her true home beside the man who had cherished her memory all these years. As Caspian smiled and wrapped his arms around her in the sunlit room, they both knew the journey ahead would be filled with promise, anchored by love, understanding, and designs forever carrying the mark of their shared stream. On Monday morning at the Hawthorne and Solenne office, the crystal lights gleamed on the polished desktop, where the 3 elegant letters H and S were subtly embossed. Elowen Solenne entered, clutching the freshly delivered fabric sample from a Provence mill, her eyes alight with excitement. The large conference room featured walnut floors and glass shelves displaying their designs, from a mint-dyed evening gown to a lavender-embroidered trench coat. At the head of the table sat Caspian Hawthorne before his open MacBook Pro. He stood to greet her with a bright smile. "You've arrived just in time. I've just finished the market survey for our spring-summer collection." As Elowen took her seat, Caspian clicked through the slides. The screen displayed customer feedback. 85% responded positively to eco-friendly designs, and 72% would purchase products infused with botanical ingredients. They discussed each metric, analyzing sustainable trends and natural dye techniques. Elowen presented her idea to incorporate dried floral sprigs at the neckline, while Caspian outlined a digital marketing campaign via the Hawthorne Foundation's channels. Throughout the meeting, their ideas flowed in harmony, her creativity paired seamlessly with his business strategy. Midway through the discussion, Elowen's gaze drifted to the window overlooking the rose garden, the very spot where she and Caspian had first reunited after so many years. Memories surged back, the murmur of the stream, his childhood voice calling her name, and her first smile in that hospital room. She felt warmth spread through her, realizing that love wasn't just a personal feeling but something that could resonate through every design and touch each customer's heart. At lunchtime, instead of returning to the manor, Caspian invited Elowen to dine at the little Soho bistro where he had first taken her out. They chose a quiet corner by a worn wooden table under soft golden lights. A fragrant bowl of pumpkin soup, steaming garlic bread, and a glass of crisp white wine marked the beginning of their meal. Caspian leaned forward, gently clinking his glass against hers. "We have a tremendous opportunity. What do you think about a pop-up store in New York?" Elowen took a sip, her eyes shining. "I fully support it. New York is a booming hub for green fashion. After lunch, they strolled through the old streets and paused at a weathered bookshop. Caspian noticed a crumpled envelope on a stone bench, retrieved it, and handed it to Elowen. The envelope's glossy paper bore the name Vogel. He said softly, "This letter from Mrs. Vogel was lost when she sent it to you years ago. She kept it safe for 20 years. Elowen's hands trembled as she held the yellowed letter, her heart flooded with memories, the invitation she'd never received to come to London. That evening, at the company's private launch party, Caspian proudly introduced Elowen as co-founder and creative director. The event space glowed with green LED lights, the signature hue of their new collection. When he invited her to speak, Elowen stepped onto the small stage and said clearly, "Thank you, Caspian, for believing in me and waiting these past 20 years. This journey has been more than business, it's a testament to sincerity and enduring love." Applause filled the room as every eye turned to them, witnessing a masterpiece come to life. Back at the manor, Caspian and Elowen sat on the second-floor balcony, London's twinkling skyline before them. They sipped their chamomile tea and discussed their upcoming charity project, gifting jackets made from botanical fabrics to cancer patients. In the hush of the night, Elowen rested her head on his shoulder and confessed, "I never imagined I'd find the perfect partner like you." Caspian held her close and whispered, "I'm grateful that at last we've found each other again, not only in memory, but here together today." Beneath the clear moonlit sky, Hawthorne Manor lay silent, save for their synchronized breathing and beating hearts, a love story's new chapter beginning not just with promises, but with the actions that would weave their shared past and future into every garment. Two hearts united from an alpine stream to a glittering metropolis, the mark of an undying love. Early on a pristine morning, the song of goldfinches rang through the Hawthorne rose garden. Caspian Hawthorne adjusted his tie before the silvered mirror, his eyes fixed on the elegant wedding invitation embossed with Caspian and Elowen and the forthcoming date. He smiled at the thought of the moment he would call her wife, the simple title he had waited a lifetime to hear. Elowen Solenne approached, cradling a bouquet of dried lavender and mint leaves. She wore a soft white silk gown, trembling slightly as she met his loving gaze. A gentle breeze stirred her hair, casting shimmering strands of light across the space. She took his hand and whispered, "We've walked 20 years together, from that alpine stream to here." Her voice caught with joy. The ceremony was held in the paved courtyard by the River Thames. Family, friends, and close partners gathered as guests. Lady Charlotte dabbed at her eyes with emotion as she watched her grandson lead the mountain girl to the altar. Arabella and Lady Isabella stood beside her, hand in hand, smiling contentedly. Elowen gave Caspian their first kiss in her magnificent wedding gown, framed by rows of ivory columns and the river's salty breeze. The reception that followed was a candlelit ball. Melodious music blended with warm laughter. Elowen, in an emerald green lavender embroidered dress, the first Hawthorne and Solenne design bearing their joint signature, stepped onto the stage to speak briefly. "Thank you all for your unwavering support. Love and creativity will forever bind us together." Thunderous applause answered her, and glasses chimed in a prolonged toast. At day's end, after the guests had departed, Caspian and Elowen strolled along the riverbank. The full moon shimmered on the water's surface. He gently slipped the wedding ring onto her finger and whispered, "From today on, I promise to protect you, respect you, and write our next stories together." Elowen smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "You are the guiding star, and I am the gentle stream, we will never be apart." They shared another kiss beneath the love bridge, their hearts declaring vows without words. The city glittered at night, a soft breeze tousling her hair, bearing witness to the triumphant song of two united hearts. From that long ago stream to this crown of happiness, Caspian and Elowen had found their destiny, the destiny of undying love. On a crystal-clear morning, goldfinches sang through the rose garden of Hawthorne and Solenne. Caspian Hawthorne gently looped his arm around Elowen's waist as she sliced bread she had baked herself, reminding him to bring honey chamomile tea up to Lady Charlotte's room. Their laughter rang through the wide hallway, blending with the warmth of the hearth and the faint scent of mint. Even their simplest daily routines were infused with affection. Every Monday morning, they held an in-house meeting for the upcoming autumn-winter collection. The design studio's doors were wide open, pure white lights illuminating the fabrics. Caspian presented his strategy for expanding into the Asian market, while Elowen unveiled her concept of incorporating maple leaf and fresh moss motifs inspired by her childhood Alps village. Afterward, they would stroll through the pear orchard behind the house, checking in with partners and comforting one another when tensions rose. Their love showed itself in how they listened and shared. He understood her creative rhythm, and she valued his strategic vision. On weekends, they often drove beyond the bustling city to the little wooden cottage at the forest's edge, Caspian's childhood home. There, Elowen scattered mint and lavender seeds along the stream, picking wildflowers herself to brew into teas and dye fabrics. Caspian and Mrs. Vogel restored the cottage into a small weaving studio where a select few clients could experience their leaf-to-fabric process. The babbling water, the soft click of needles, and their laughter intertwined, a reminder that their steadfast love was rooted in the past. In their first year of marriage, they welcomed a daughter, little Sylvie, with golden hair and bright blue eyes. Elowen carried her in her arms while embroidering lavender blossoms on the traditional christening cloth, and Caspian framed a photograph of the two of them by the stream. Each afternoon, they told Sylvie the tale of the boy and the girl Solenne, a story of rescue and timeless love. Hearing her softly utter "Daddy" and "Mummy" for the first time was their sweetest joy. As Sylvie grew and learned to pitch tents and forage for herbs, her parents often brought her back to the ancestral village so she would know her roots and love nature. Caspian built a small library beside the stream, stocking shelves with books on medicinal plants and sustainable economics. Elowen taught her daughter to embroider lavender motifs on small swatches, then gently reminded her, "Cherish this land and the people who give you life." Clumsy but eager, Sylvie displayed her mother's passion from a tender age. Meanwhile, the Hawthorne and Solenne brand flourished, not only on international runways but through charitable projects. They donated jackets to cancer patients and distributed herbal kits to leprosy camps, ensuring the poor had access to healing remedies. Caspian often spoke at forums, fashion should not only beautify but also heal. Elowen stood by his side, proud of the positive impact they created together. Each October, when the maples turned red, the Hawthorne and Solenne family hosted a Golden Autumn Festival in the manor's garden. Guests included Sylvie's school friends, international partners, and the very people they'd helped in the leprosy camps. They erected straw pavilions, tasted lavender elixirs, and displayed mini embroidered dresses bedecked with vivid florals. As night fell and lanterns glowed, Caspian and Elowen danced a waltz amid the magical setting, laughter and folk music filling the air. 5 years on, when Sylvie reached her teenage years, they arranged for her to study at the Milan Institute, continuing her passion for design. Elowen proudly escorted her daughter to campus, gifting her a box of mint-scented thread, and urged her, "Create with all your heart." Caspian remained ever at her side, a sturdy shoulder to lean on. They believed Sylvie would write the next family chapter with her own colors and love. Under the last full moon of autumn, Caspian and Elowen sat on the stone steps by the now historic stream, reflecting on their 20-year journey. The water flowed on, echoing their love's anthem and their shared growth. Caspian gently placed a silver bracelet engraved S and C on Elowen's wrist, a symbol of two hearts united. She smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude and love. "No matter how vast the future, we will always be each other's." Beneath a star-studded sky and the distant murmur of the stream, the timeless love story of Caspian and Elowen, once a boy and a mountain girl by a stream, had blossomed into a happily ever after, proving that fate and genuine love would forever light their path.